cohort, just because they're the ones, who we have the most data on. And essentially, when we started Project Onramp, I don't think there was really a vision of what would happen at the end of a summer internship. And so Sarah and I just sort of evolved the tracking of alumni just as we went along. And a lot of it was based on bandwidth, how much time and bandwidth we had to keep in touch with these students and really track them. So what kind of evolved out of that was that I sent the 2019 cohort a survey at the end of summer 2020 to kind of find out what happened to those students who were graduating, who graduated that May. And then for the students who were looking for summer internships, what they did that summer. Now, this data is a little skewed because summer 2020 was just the height of the pandemic. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at the data. So for the 2019 rising seniors who did summer internships, they graduated in May 2020. And the good news is 100% of them got full-time jobs in the midst of a pandemic. And I think that really speaks to the strength and of the importance of having these really great internships on your resume. You can see that of the May 2020 graduates, that first top bar, around half of them went into the life sciences, and the other half ended up working at places like Fidelity, State Street, some smaller tech companies. So essentially, tech and banking, finance were the other sectors that our students went into. Then in May 2021, there were students from that cohort, who were juniors in 2019, who graduated, and you can see that the majority of those seniors went to life science companies. And then some others, again, a few went to grad school, and the other two really big industries seem to be tech and banking. And then you can see that the younger students, who are still to graduate, I will keep in touch with them, and I will, just report back and track them. And I am currently surveying the 2020 students. So I'll have similar data on what they did this summer, if they graduated, where they ended up. So essentially, even the alumni experience, in addition to the tracking, is pretty ad hoc. We have an alumni group on LinkedIn. Anytime starting in 2020, I started to get tons of communication from companies looking for full-time entry-level folks. Anytime anyone starts a program, they let me know. So I post all of that on the alumni group. Not all the alums belong to that group, but we're constantly trying to kind of work with them to join. And we've had some success in really getting students to apply, for instance, to the Pfizer Breakthrough Fellows Program. Students are in the process of applying to the Lab Central program. Students reach out to me all the time to help with finding mentors, to help with finding jobs. And what I do at that point is with mentors, I send out emails. I've developed a pretty big network at this point, and I because I work so closely with almost everyone, I have a sense of like what people's backgrounds are and what they like to do. And so, I do feel like I have literally over 100 people who would be happy to help. It's just a question of having the bandwidth to do this more systematically. Even full-time employment, there are quite a few students who I've referred to the HR directors that I work with. Filmawit, who is on this call, reached out to me, and I was able to connect her with the Institute for Protein Innovation at Harvard, where she now works. And then I do check in with students, especially if they've been unresponsive to surveys. I check in with them via email. So right now, it's still a manageable number of alums for me. So I just do it all very personally because I know them and they know me. But again, going forward, as our number of alums continue to grow, that really, really personal way of tracking them will not be sustainable. Here, I mean, it's, I think, fairly self-explanatory why we would want to provide alumni services. I mean, we are really helping these students with the very first step with the internship. And as you know, it takes a lot of help to even get that really good first job. And then like recently a student who works at the Broad reached out to me because she was having a panic attack about like, did I make the right decision? Am I on the right path as a neuroscience major? So I connected her with a young female mid-career neuroscientist who works at Synlogic, just to have conversations, and that's been going really well. So I guess the first reason we would provide alumni services is to really make sure that the students we're introducing to life sciences stay in life sciences. I think creating a cohort of alumni who are peers and networking with each other is helpful to them. It's helpful to us to sell the program. I think, you know, encouraging alumni to think of themselves as sort of a community, because this is a really diverse group, to think of themselves as a community within the industry, I think is very helpful for the company where they work, as well as for the industry as a whole. And then, you know, obviously to determine outcomes for us, we want to see, you know, if everyone gets one job in the life science industry and then we notice people are just switching to other industries, that would tell us something. So it's really to kind of see how well this program works. In terms of what we could offer, I mean, we could do so much more, I think, with more resources. I know that the student support partners do offer job search support. That's something we could really help with. We could make the LinkedIn alumni group more robust. We could help with resume review, interviews. Life Science Cares has programming that includes mentoring, and we could make sure that the students sign up for that. We could have networking events. So there just are a lot of things that we could do.
So this is a discussion point, I think, for all of you. And I guess maybe for the student support partners first, how can we amplify or best kind of dovetail with services you're already providing to make sure students have the support post internship? And then for the company side, you know, is it useful for us to have this, to cultivate this community that you could tap into? Is this, you know, should we put some thought, time, energy into sort of alumni support system beyond just surveying for our own tracking and measurement?
Because we know that it would be nice to have this. I guess we're just wondering whether in, you know, if resources are limited, you all think this is a must-have rather than a nice-to-have.
Hi, this is Nicole Barna speaking. I just have a question, a little bit, maybe it's a little bit different, but could also relate. Have you thought about having your alumni also be a resource for current students? And what that would do is it would sort of give a chance to kind of keep people connected, but also give them a role to share their expertise and maybe spread a bit of the responsibilities from you all in terms of the current students.
I think that's,
yeah, that's such a great idea. And I think they are the best mentors for the younger students. But, you know, right now we do that through the LinkedIn alumni group. And again, to do it more intentionally, because these students are all at various different schools with various different student support partners. So to do it more intentionally, again, would require us to be involved and to kind of have a system of like pairing them up or encouraging meetings or networking. We'd have to kind of almost set it up initially and then ask them to take it from there.
I can say that, thinking about next summer's programs, the summer sessions that we put together where we do have industry speakers and industry mentors, next summer will be the first year that we have alumni who have been now working in industry for a period of time to serve those roles. So I think there'll be, some volunteers that we reach out to participate in those. I want to go back because it's been something on my list to figure out, but I think Robert has mentioned a couple of times, like, how can we use the intern experience to both kind of hold companies accountable, right? Like showcase positive experiences, start to really understand from the intern's perspective what makes a good internship, but also then be able to leverage those success stories to recruit more students, recruit more companies. And so that would mean us intentionally tapping alumni to become ambassadors in some way, to help with a little bit of maybe sort of media training or, storytelling training to help tease out some of those stories into content that we could share to continue to build the ecosystem.
I love Nicole's idea. Let me just comment really quickly, and it's a bit of an extreme example, so I'll say that up front. I've seen so many different alumni communities and what they've done well and what they've suffered from. One that has always remained sort of top of mind to me is what's called VMS, the Venture Mentoring Service that MIT has with its undergraduates. But what's remarkable about it is that these are people who remain deeply involved in this community decades after they became party to it in the beginning. And so I do think you have to invest in the hard work that keeps them connected, keeps them involved, and involves offering roles of leadership, and so they see themselves in exciting ways or seen, as it. But I don't think it happens purely organically by accident. I do think we'd have to be intentional, as you said, Lila, and create structure right around how we could expect them to be increasingly impactful as mentors, not just the second or third year out of this role, but 10 or 15 years later.
And the thing is, Robert, I think with this student population, I think there is one big difference, I think, with more affluent students who may realize the absolutely critical nature of networks. I find that the younger students, especially as interns, they know, okay, we talk about networking so much, they kind of know they should think it's important. But I've noticed that it's only the students who are now working in their first year who are, the penny has finally dropped. Like, they are realizing they're the ones who are emailing me and, talking about networks now. So it's really also just that lack of awareness of like what a golden opportunity this is. And I've started being much more explicit in my emails to them, much more like a helicopter mom than a program administrator.
We all need more of those. Those are
Yeah,
cool.
just saying, you've got to, you cannot pass up these opportunities because you'll regret it later. You really need to take advantage of these networks. But I noticed there is like a lack of awareness there.
To see it, to understand it. Yeah.
Sarah, this is Cara from Bottom Line. I'll just go back to your initial question. So at Bottom Line, our end goal in terms of employability is that students secure a career relevant full-time job or select a continuing education program that's going to propel them on a career pathway that provides, social, professional, and economic mobility. So in that sense, what you're talking about in terms of the alumni experience is very much aligned with where we're headed, or where we're currently at as a program. I think one of the best ways to support that goal on the program end for us would be to continue to share where there are life science entry-level roles in volume, so that we can continue to market that to our Onramp alum, as well as, other recent grads in our program who maybe didn't get a chance to participate, but are still very interested. So it's a wonderful, nice to have. I don't know if it's a need to have, but if it was resourced properly and you were able to continue to provide that kind of support for Project Onramp alums, it certainly would align with what we're doing here.
Can I ask you, Cara, when you talk about entry-level roles that are available in volume, are you thinking like very high level, like, Mass Bioed does a ton of research in roles where the industry will be hiring over the, short and long term, but it's, it's aggregate, it's very high level, and sort of being able to tell Project Onramp alum, quality is going to be a huge path for the next couple of years? Or are you thinking literally just a company that hires a lot of people, or both, or?
A little bit of both. I'll share, like, when we're, in terms of what kind of support we provide to our new grads, we track where they're headed, their first destination after college. And then a team of 4 literally pick up the phone and start making calls to support up to 6 months out for our new grads. And so we're saying, hey, did you know that there's a job at da-da-da-da that seems really aligned with what you studied in, or what you're telling me you're interested in? And so if Lila says, like, hey, we're looking for, I just heard from this partner who's looking for XYZ, and Tremont gets that and says, like, if you're talking to any life science majors, this company is hiring 5 students, like, we're tracking that and, like, calling students. So the actual, like, job title and name of the company is really helpful to us, although, that higher level information is useful as well.
Okay. That's just helpful from a tactical perspective to understand, like, what level of data we want to be collecting. I mean, Lila and I are like vacuums for entry-level job positions. Every time we see someone like tweet one, we're, sharing, and some of that's us looking, right? It would be helpful to really have companies feel like we are a recruiting partner on some level, right? And set it up sort of systems wide, that entry-level jobs, we'd be added to the distribution list or what have you, whatever the right way to do that is. Understanding we have right now a relatively small pool of students, but that will grow, and that we're invested in that growing. So I think that's,
I mean, ideally, if time and resources were not an issue, what I'd like to do is have a system where, every year from our class of interns, we send the resumes of those students going into senior year, sort of in the fall, to all of our corporate partners. Because I find even at the smaller companies, sometimes they'll see a student who is really talented and they'll sort of almost find a position for them, or kind of keep them in mind for a position that they may be thinking of creating. It seems very organic that way. So I just would love to be able to almost present a class of, future graduates to our corporate partners. Like, that could be something that they have access to as a perk of being in Project Onramp every year, where they do get the information of the graduating seniors, and then they can take it from there and run with it. But, having that built in as a part of what you get when you join Project Onramp would be really great, I think.
Hey, Lila,
I really like that idea about sending corporate partners those CVs, because I was going to suggest a way that one-offs, right? When there's a student looking for a job, you've sent me, for instance, a resume and say, hey, is there a job for that? And I really like that, because it sort of, picks it out of the portal pool, and that's what we need, is to really enrich these CVs and get them in front of our hiring manager. So I like that idea. And I was also going to say, in terms of what does the student need? I think what I can see especially in a large company, is once they've gotten that job, they still need support in that first few years, really, to manage everything. And I'm seeing that in some of our entry-level hires, where they're a year or 2 in, and all of a sudden things are happening, things are not going the way they thought they might go. Maybe there's been a reorg, and and they're working with someone who maybe isn't on the same page as they are, right? All of these things that happen in a company, and they need extra support that they're not always getting from their manager, because maybe their manager doesn't really fully understand where they're at and where they're coming from. So in terms of what the student need is for an alumni support system would be that sort of more support in managing their first few years in the job.
I guess my only suggestion to you guys would be just to, I think when you approach an alumni program, which is something that we've worked on our small nonprofit side here too, is just trying to make sure that it's something that, first of all, it's an investment in the future and towards the opportunities that they can create, but it's an investment. So there's work that goes along with that. So making sure that that doesn't detract from your mission, but enhances it. So maybe defining some alumni roles that they can participate in. I would use LinkedIn or LinkedIn groups as a great way to do that, because it takes a lot of the management off of that page. And then populating that forum to keep it active and interesting is a key part of that too. So just make sure you think a lot about what are the roles that they can provide that would help offset your workload, so that you become, that the sum of that investment becomes greater than what you had before, and it doesn't become a detraction away from kind of the core mission you guys are working on.
Thanks, John. We might follow up with you to pick your brain a little bit on your alumni network as well.
We've got a lot of lessons learned on our end. We'd be happy to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are aware that in situations like this, it's not always if you build it, they will come, right? Like we have to be very thoughtful about the point, right? Like, what are we trying to do to serve a variety of stakeholders, and very clear about that, so that we're not fighting the tide, right? It's just one more thing that we're asking these students to do. So, all right. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us on, just because I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about measurement and, how we set that vision for what success looks like. Lila, do you want to talk a little bit about how we right now quantify our work and what we might do moving forward?
Yeah, and you can see all the things we measure now on this slide. Bottom line really does most of the measuring on the student side, and we get an incredible amount of information from them about, really broken down about which skills students felt they worked on during the internship and their level of satisfaction. And I have to say, and Kara can speak to this more, but I have to say, I think so far it's been really a pretty high level of satisfaction, with most students saying it was a good experience, with most students saying they would take another job in this internship or job in this industry. We also really insist on engagement in our summer programs and present that as sort of a required portion of the program. And I really think that those programs make a huge impact. So the level of engagement for me is a big metric of success. Company satisfaction, I survey the companies a couple of times during the summer, and the feedback from supervisors for me is also a real metric of success, as well as the more anecdotal feedback I get from the hiring folks and the HR folks about the process. At a very basic level, was the student a good match for the internship? I think that's got to be our sort of North Star. I mean, we want this to be a win for the student and the company. So I think that's really the most important thing that we need to shoot for. And so far, I think we've been doing a pretty good job. Although, there have been internships that have not been a good fit for various reasons. Just personality match between the supervisor and the student, things like that. Maybe not as well defined projects, but I don't think we've had any situation where the student really couldn't do the work. So that's been great. We track how many students are going into the industry after graduation, because that really is our goal. And I think that would be a metric of success. And total number of students with a caveat. I mean, I really, really am a proponent of quality over quantity. So I don't want us to really get hung up on growing, like going from, 150 to 500 to 1,000, because I do think that that is not, it's sometimes in tension with our other goal of really nurturing students and make sure they're going into the industry. So we want to balance those two. We want to make sure we offer a high touch, high quality program. And that may mean a smaller amount of students, but a high percentage having a great experience and going into the industry. There was a lot of feedback from companies that they were interested in having students from underrepresented groups. So we do track that. And I think that that's a goal that Sarah and I feel strongly about, that we want to increase that number. We also we are really committed to serving students from all socioeconomically underrepresented groups, because we find that that's just as lacking in the industry as people from underrepresented groups. So that's something we measure, or we think is important, and that's reflected by the types of partners, student support partners we have. We make sure that they're serving those types of students. So what is missing? And I'd love people's feedback on this. What else could we track that would be helpful to companies? What could we track that would be helpful to student support partners and students?
And I guess I'll say maybe in a more provocative way, if we came to you either as a student support partner or a company and said, we want you to double your commitment to this program, what data, what success story, what metric, what measurement would allow you to sell that to your team? Like what's the story, right, that we need to be giving you that makes this an obvious choice for you to get involved?
Hi, this is Jada from Minds Matter. I would say, given the kind of emphasis on supporting students from racially underrepresented backgrounds and from also socioeconomically underrepresented backgrounds, which really makes up the vast majority of the students that we work with at Minds Matter, a couple of things that come to mind, just the idea of like a ripple effect in like two strands. I think one is like, how many students are actually recommending, say, an on-ramp internship to a peer of theirs, right? A peer who looks like them, who comes from a similar background to them, who's, maybe not involved in Minds Matter directly, or maybe is involved in another program, another student support program, or maybe is an alum of the Minds Matter program as well. Like how many students are actually kind of like wanting to spread the word about this and getting this out to people in their community. And then the other strand of that kind of like idea of a ripple effect is, what are the percentage of students who feel like this internship then help them secure their next internship or their job because of the people that they were connecting with at the on-ramp internship. So I think that just the idea of the like ripple effect to like people in their community and just in their own lives would be really, really useful for us.
Thank you.
Jada, I love that focus on the networking piece, because I think that's the component we're trying to capitalize on, right? It's like, how is this social capital supporting you in your momentum in your career trajectory? So that's so key. Sarah and Lila, we've had this conversation before, but I think just continuing to measure and hopefully grow in the amount of opportunities that continue to be available across function areas within the life science industry. I think if you were to come to Bottom Line and say, like, we want to double the number of interns at Bottom Line, sources, we would run our numbers and say, like, we track our students' primary career interest and their majors, and we just don't have, for, many, many reasons, starting when students are, in K through 12, like systematically being pushed away and under-resourced in terms of getting access to the kinds of resources they need to be interested in and persistent through hard sciences, but we just don't have the students. But if there are opportunities in other function areas, particularly social science type of roles, which many of our students do gravitate towards. I think that would help us just know whether or not we have the students to kind of send your way.
Sarah, I think that might be a good segue into our next slide before we really kind of get into a discussion from the student support partners. I just want to quickly go over what we think success kind of looks like. And obviously successful completion of all the summer internships, positive feedback from companies, students, a strong cohort of STEM majors. And then, Kara, you can see I have there that we want to increase the number of social science majors in order to better respond to stated student need. And I really see, like this year we had 80 something students from Bottom Line, and the place where we were kind of experiencing some issues was that supply of science students, of STEM students. There were so many incredibly talented social science students who didn't get a job through Project Onramp because we didn't have the opportunities available. So definitely serving those students. Yeah, a culture of honest dialogue with companies about diversity efforts and what inclusion really means. This is something that's important to me. I feel like in the past 3 years, we've been doing a lot of education. I've been learning a lot from Bottom Line in particular, and then kind of using that information to really change the frame of reference for the companies. And I think that's been really successful, where I see when companies sort of start to think about this population of students differently and approach this whole process differently, we have more hires, and it really, I feel like, is moving the needle. And then another sort of metric of success for us is just having program quality goals rather than just quantity goals. We want to grow sustainably because of that we really want to keep this a high quality program, but also understanding that we have to be nimble, that the landscape is going to change. All the planning that we do now obviously is short-term in a sense, because things could change and nothing is set in stone, and we want to be nimble. So that's sort of, we will send you this information so that you can really absorb it in detail. I'm rushing through it in the interest of time. Sarah, we can go to the next slide to kind of really talk about what success and metrics look like for the student support partners. And Kara, if you can kind of take the lead on this, that would be great.
Sure. I mentioned a little bit above or earlier in the conversation, but we measure our overall program success by our DEAL model, DEAL. So in terms of degree, we want our students graduating within 6 years, employability, securing a career relevant first job or continuing education. That's going to support the student in their career interests. Affordability, we are aiming to ensure that all of our students are graduating with less than $31,000 in school loan debt. And then in terms of life, the L in our DEAL model, demonstrating strong self-awareness, self-management, and decision-making skills. So really when talking to Onramp, we're kind of focused on that employability one. So that's what success metrics look like for end of program for Bottom Line.
Mm-hmm. Jada, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, a few things.
What partnership with us look like for you?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind when we think about the students that we work with. One is, students being able to actually name, whether it's like 2 to 3 things that they learned from their internship experience, right? Things that they learned about themselves, whether they liked that or didn't like that. Like that is like something that for us is always important. We tell our students, like, knowing what you don't like is equally as important as knowing what you do like. What did they learn about the industry? What did they learn about their role or the work that they did? Another kind of key thing for Minds Matter is just the idea of transferable skills and like the skills that we're developing in students through our programming, things like prioritization, teamwork, self-advocacy, identity development, like communication. What are the transferable skills that students see from like our kind of key skill sets in their actual internship? Students being able to name just the connection between their experience and then their professional goals. If students feel valued at their internship, if they feel confident coming out of their internship. And then again, I think a big one for us is around this, how are students then bringing this back to their community and like helping to uplift their peers. So students being able to say that they would, be willing to encourage others to apply to an internship because of their experience. So those are some of the like major things that for us would kind of like look like success.
And do you have any feedback yet? Do you have the data yet from the students who were part of Project Onramp in summer 2021?
Not yet. More kind of anecdotal feedback at this point. But our students really, really loved their internship experiences. And I'm very excited about kind of tapping those students to then kind of like talk to the next cohort of folks who are going to be participating in this next summer. But we had like a just resounding positivity just across the board from students, which is really exciting. But we're still in the process of collecting that kind of like harder data.
So this is Pam, and this is going back a bit. For the alumni students who did not stay in the industry, do you have data as to why?
I don't think it was, only anecdotal, because I've talked to some of them. And for some of them, it was just that they found a great, and the students who went out of the industry tended to be in things like marketing. And they just found opportunities at these other companies. There were jobs available. There was one student, for instance, who worked at AstraZeneca in finance, but she was offered an incredible job by Ernst & Young, so she took it. So I think it was just, these are students who are talented and, can really have their pick of jobs too, at least from the 2019 cohort. I've been so impressed. So I think they just got good offers. A couple of students went into, like, one student is working at Brigham and Women's and the other students are working at Dana-Farber. And, there is a cohort of students who wants to go into medicine or be PAs, that kind of thing. So those students always pick the more, medicine oriented jobs rather than industry.
Okay, and then a follow-up question to that is, I think on the previous slide, you had something about looking for possibly for more social science roles. So can you comment on that a little bit more too? Because I think one of our biggest struggles is trying to get students oriented more towards STEM. So
Yeah,
again, I as a social science, alumni myself, I certainly understand the allure, but my question is, as we're struggling to get more people into STEM, should we at the same time look for more roles in the social sciences? I'm just wondering if then Project Onramp is starting to spread itself a little thin, is my question.
Yeah, good question. I mean, the jobs in the industry are primarily for STEM students. And I guess what we're bumping up against is a more structural problem, that there just isn't the supply. And I think it reflects what Bottom Line and I'm sure Minds Matter are feeling, that students, for whatever reason, starting in kindergarten, as Kara mentioned, like, they're just not going into STEM. So I think there are great nonprofits that Sarah works with who are trying to fix that at an earlier stage. But by the time these students are in college, they've pretty much decided what they like. And so, we're just kind of dealing with the existing supply, and the existing supply definitely reflects more social science students who are, you know, I think many of the science students who want to be part of Onramp, we can match them. The people that we are not able to match are the social science students. There are students, you know, majoring in things like public health. And this year we did match a couple of public health students, but it's harder to match them than a student majoring in biology.
Okay, thanks.
I think there are stats around like a third of students of color initially pursuing STEM majors and then leaving for various reasons. I mean, it's so built into our education system, so it does start so early on. But I think for many, at least bottom line students, what we hear from our advisors is they're entering college maybe not as prepared as their more affluent peers because they haven't had access to the same kinds of coursework or rigor in high school. Maybe they're not, you know, they're working part-time or supporting family members, so they're not getting to do like those additional research projects with professors or getting to clock as much lab time. So there's just a lot of additional factors that go into, you know, even just like going into the class and looking around and seeing that the class makeup doesn't look like you and feeling, you know, do I belong here? Like who can I be connecting with? Like a lot of shame associated with not knowing some of the content that maybe some of your peers already know. So I think and the pandemic has only kind of added to that because it's meant that a couple of cohorts of classes haven't gotten to clock any lab time. So I think we would potentially see more bottom line students who are interested, but it might take some upskilling on the front end to be able to kind of get them ready to, you know, have even that basic lab safety knowledge to be eligible.
I'd love to hear from company folks on this call about sort of what a successful partnership with Project Onramp looks like to you. Like what can you take back to your stakeholders within the company to say, we partnered with Onramp, it was really successful, and here's why?
Good morning. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is really what percentage of these students is coming back to the company post-graduation or even for a second internship opportunity, and how are they helping us to build a stronger pipeline of talent? So I think in terms of success, it's easy to say, you know, they left the summer feeling great, but if they're no longer looking at this company, I mean, it's great if they're staying in the industry. That's also something that we definitely want. But really, are they coming back for other opportunities? Within Takeda, we also have rotational programs for recently graduated seniors. And so it's something that we highlight throughout the summer as an opportunity to really come back and strengthen our pipeline and be a part of the organization. And a lot of times we do have interns who come back. We've got interns who have done an internship. They've done the operational development program, which is one of several rotation programs. And 2 or 3 years later, they are managers or supervisors, and they're well beyond what some of their peers are doing. And so success for us would be to build diversity into a pipeline like that. Unfortunately, it's not something that we've seen yet, but maybe really kind of digging into programs like Project Onramp would help build that pipeline the way that we're looking to.
Yeah, Annie, I think most companies are really looking for that like return on investment, and you know, understandably. My feeling, again, just from working with students for these 3 short years, is that would require like a little bit more sort of really explicit nurturing and conversations of these interns, just saying at the end of the first summer, you know, we'd really like you to come back next summer. is that something you'd be interested in? And almost kind of really, there was one, Beam Therapeutics did that with one intern, but it really was just very explicit and kind of getting the commitment from the student, because the students often don't even realize that that's an option, that they can reach back to their supervisor and say like, hey, I worked for you last summer, you know. So really being explicit with all of these things that I think more affluent students might sort of know. I think the operational development rotational program, you know, and all of those rotational programs, I'm sort of just getting to know about that, and people are contacting me and I'm in conversation. So I'm really hoping that that's something we can build in, where again, we're sending all of our seniors to those programs so that then you guys can reach out to them directly and encourage them to participate.
Yeah, and that's great, Lila. I think one other thing as you're talking about it is some of the challenges that we have with hearing back from the students. I know that they're constantly in contact with you all. They're constantly in contact. I know the interns that I worked with this summer, they were probably tired of seeing my face at some point. But we really do need them to provide that information, because then that follow-up becomes almost obvious for us, right? So we sent out surveys toward the end of the program, a lot of information gathering, and regardless of whether students were in Project Onramp or not, we only had about 60% of our students who responded to those surveys. And so if they were to decide that next year they really wanted another opportunity, or they were really interested in that operational development program, the first thing that we would do is to go and look at that data. And so also connecting with the students for awareness of how we make decisions. The data is not going to tell us everything, right? We want to re-interview, we want to see how they've changed, how they've developed in a couple of months or the last year, whatever it is, whatever that time frame is. But they also need to understand that providing that information, even if it seems a little bit annoying, providing that information up front really helps us make additional decisions. It helps us with funding too, right? If I had 10 interns this summer and I want, you know, an additional 10 next summer, I have to show my leadership team that this is what we got out of it. This is what made it successful. This is what the students got out of it. And this is how it's helping to build that pipeline that we so much talk about. And sometimes I think the students are unaware of that. And so these requests for information can feel like additional work. And so just continuing to help them understand from a business standpoint what's needed to ensure that they're able to continue to grow and that the company is able to support them. And what support looks like really at the end of the day is resources and finances. And if you can give us the data, we can provide both.
Yeah, I think that it's really emerged that, you know, really encouraging students to be more engaged is critical.
I'd like to put a plug in for graduate school. You know, at Pfizer in Kendall Square, we have all kinds of jobs for undergraduate, but we have a lot of jobs for PhDs. So I was disappointed to see how few Project Onramp students have gone on to graduate school. It's only 2 years, so, you know, but, you know, I'd really like to see that number go up over the years. I know I had a casual conversation in the lab with a few interns this summer, some Project Onramp, some other. None of them realized what the path to graduate school was, or that you get a stipend. You know, you get paid to go to graduate school. It's not an additional cost. And they had never heard of it before. You know, that would be great if some of that programming could be added in. Again, we're getting the students really late in their whole, you know, education career pathway decision making. But of course, it's not too late to get a job, get a rotational job in one of these companies, and then go back to graduate school too. But I just want to put a plug in for that, which I would love to see more of these students going into PhD programs.
Kara, do you have any data on that, or like any feelings or thoughts about that?
I think for a student who is focused and knows that that's the career path they're interested in, it makes a lot of sense. I think we often find for many of our grads that grad school is a default sometimes if they haven't landed a first destination or first job right after college. So they think like, well, I haven't found something yet, so I'll go to grad school to be more marketable. And depending on what you're planning on going into, that's a pretty costly investment for career exploration. So I think it really depends on the student. If the student knows like this is where I want to go and it makes sense, and you truly are investing in being able to enter a field of interest, then absolutely. We just try to make sure our students are making informed decisions and really questioning kind of the why. So like if you're feeling unfocused and this is a way to explore, let's pump the brakes and maybe try and experience something first, and ensure that you need that kind of degree in order to do well in that industry. But if you need that degree in order to enter the industry, then it makes a lot of sense. So I think right now is a really good time to talk about that. Often many companies are expanding their benefits to include things like tuition reimbursement or to offer graduate school as a part of a program. And so I think that's kind of the best of both worlds for many of our students. So that's something that we've been exploring more with students lately.
Yeah, and to be clear, like sort of going and getting a master's is very different from getting a PhD. So I think the nuance between that, right? So you do have to pay to get a master's. That's not the stipend. I was talking about a PhD. I'd love the students to understand what their choices are, and that what you get with a PhD. That you are the one directing the research and calling the shots, and it's your ideas and things. And so, so I put a big plug in for in some of the programming to really help students understand what their possibilities are.
Great. Well, I know we're just scratching the surface on some of this stuff, but I do appreciate you all coming prepared to have this conversation, because I think it really does summarize what we've been trying to get to for the last couple of months. What is the vision of a hugely successful project Onramp for all of the stakeholders? So just in the last 2 minutes we have remaining, our next steps are we'll summarize this meeting, share it with a few people who couldn't join us today. But also in preparation for October, be coming back to you all with highlights from all of these conversations smooshed together, for lack of a better phrase, to what we hope will be a clear vision and plan for Onramp over the next couple of years. So stay tuned for that. Appreciate all of your efforts to connect with us offline too, to learn more about some of these points, but look forward to bringing back to you a solid plan to grow this program.
Fantastic.
Any final comments? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I
everyone.
just had one super quick comment question,
Go ahead.
and maybe I can connect with you, Willa and Sarah, offline. I know I mentioned, and I'm working with Willa to kind of create that blog post for our ISPE team. One of the things that we're trying to develop is a career day for university level students, where they kind of come in and they start to build those connections early on. And I'm saying this because I'm looking at, and please forgive me if I say your name wrong, Yefe. I'm looking at your comment about why students are leaving early on because of those first year courses. And so that is one of the things that we're trying to tackle, but we're having some challenges in understanding how to really develop something like that and the timeline and things like that. So maybe that's something that I can connect with you offline about, but really trying to see the level of interest and how to connect and how that would be helpful to students like those in Project Onramp. I'll leave it at that. Make sure,
Great idea.
Everyone's questioning.
No, I mean, it's really fantastic. And I'm always pushing, to have younger students hired, because I mean, I would say across the board, when students are in that environment, they are energized and inspired and excited. And we need that really early on. But at the same time, younger students have fewer skills. So it's just balancing that. You know, managers, of course, prefer those rising seniors. So it's a little bit of a struggle to get rising sophomores hired.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
We'll follow
everyone.
up with everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.